What's going on, Mountaineer fans? Hello and welcome into week 2 of the 2021 season. App State took care of business last week against ECU 33-19, and our opponent this week is the Miami Hurricanes, who went down 44-13 against probably the best team in football in Alabama. So what we're going to do is jump right in. Let's break this down. Let's see where we think we can be successful and where we might have some problems against Miami. Chase Bryce had a great debut for App last week. His decision making, minus obviously the late interception, was great. I do question what it'll look like when his first read is an open. Luckily, that wasn't much of an issue against the Pirates last week, but it will certainly be more noticeable versus the Canes this time. He'll need to still rely on the quick slants and get the ball out quick to avoid Canes' front four and that blitz that they run. Miami's D brings the pressure quite a bit, and they'll definitely have some more success getting through our O-line than we saw last week against the Pirates. Noel and Peoples both went over the century mark last week. While Noel had more yards, Peoples in the end came away with 2 scores on the night. With the way Miami's defense is built, I'd expect more from Peoples in the ground game. His bigger frame will work more to his advantage against the bigger Miami defenders. Both will still play prominent roles, but I just think you'll see more gadget-type plays drawn up for Noel, maybe some quick passes out of the backfield to get him into open space. That would allow him to take more advantage of his speed that he's got. But I think between the tackles, Camerun Peoples is going to have more success just because of the size and speed of this defense.
Next, we'll take a look at Thomas Hennigan and the game he had. Just had a great game overall. You could tell he was really pumped to be there. For those of you that saw the video section in the stadium, I think right before the fourth quarter, he was just going nuts, really involved in it. His voice was involved in the video, got everybody pumped up in the crowd, and just had a heck of a game overall. Again, just the most sure-handed receiver on App's roster the last few seasons, really, and obviously against ECU the other night. It's just got everything that's needed. Maybe not quite the top end speed, as you can see here. He kind of gets run down by 2 defenders. Obviously, maybe still a little bit slow from the injury last year, but much more close to 100%. I think you keep a bigger eye out on Corey Sutton this week, though. I think he's poised to have a big game. If you remember, the UNC showed up big time in the UNC game for sure. It just plays well in big games. Wasn't quite targeted as much against ECU, but I'd expect that to change against Miami, and we'll see him back on the scoreboard again very shortly.
Defensively, Jackson, Harrington, Jolly, and Taylor can all bring it. We know that. We knew that coming in. It was no surprise to see how well they played against the Pirates offense, All 4 definitely had a great game. I expect that to continue this week. Obviously, the challenge is much bigger, but I think these 4 players will rise to the occasion. I think Jackson is, I don't know, I saw a lot more out of him than I had recently that I was really impressed with. I think he just really helps control that defense and gets them going. Taylor probably didn't show up on the stat sheet as much as he should have. I think he had a much better game than it's going to look like on the stat sheet. He's disruptive and he brings the pressure. One of the great plays he got to the quarterback and took him to the ground right after Ehlers released it, but that pressure caused a bad throw and an incompletion. So I think that's going to lend a lot of good things to the App State defense this week.
Check out these numbers here. They're not just for the Sun Belt. They're not just for the G5 conferences. This is all of football for last season. So this is no joke defense. Obviously, App can only play who's put in front of them, so they're not always seeing the best teams around, but the defense is solid. As you can see, Jolly here was just great on lockdown coverage all night. He did have 1 pass interference penalty, but when you play as aggressive and as physical as he does, those things are going to happen. You'll see this play at least twice more, just getting perfect position. About the only thing he didn't do properly in this one is come away with the ball, but you also got to give ECU wide receiver some credit on that one for almost playing more defensively than he was trying to actually catch that one. There he is, another pass breakup there. And then Harrington, man, this guy was just on fire all night, just coming up with great pressure after pressure. You can see him on the blitz here. No one even touches him. Gets right to Ehlers, takes him down. Little FTC there. Again, just the speed, the intensity that he plays with. It's definitely going to be needed Saturday night against the U. And one last blitz. Looks vaguely familiar to the very last play we just watched. Hopefully we'll see more of that this weekend. I'd love it.
So De'Aaron King is the biggest highlight for this team. He can scramble, and he's much faster than what we saw last week out of Ehlers. However, he's not as big, and the defense should put a body on him as much as possible. Coming off an injury from last season, you want him thinking about whether he really wants to take that hit or not. If the defense can blitz successfully, then they will have a decent night. You know, this is a night game down in Miami. Will help with the humidity and the heat a little bit. However, it's still going to be hot and sticky down there. So anything to get our defense going quickly will be really successful in the long run, taking him down. King panicked a little bit against the pressure of the Bama front four. He quickly tried to escape the pocket when breakdowns did occur. He's not the best thrower on the run. He can certainly get the job done, though. As you can see in a couple of these plays here, he does throw off of his front foot a little bit when he's on the run, tends to throw off the front foot, and has decent success. Not always the best placement to give his wide receivers more downfield advantage, but he can usually get it complete to them. He doesn't have the biggest arm overall. Most of his throws are kind of in that 10 to 12 yard range. Oftentimes, it's a little bit less than that, and it looks a lot like Chase Bryce from last week in the App State offense. Just getting it to the balls to the playmakers and trying to get them to make the plays. He can uncork it when needed, as we just saw in this touchdown here. So he's definitely successful in trying to get the ball to Charleston Rambo last week. Even though he didn't get the biggest plays out of him, he was targeted the most. And look for him to have a much bigger game this week against App. They will try and team up quickly for sure. And then also keep an eye on tight end Will Mallory. He had a quiet game last week, but I'd expect him to play a much larger role against App on Saturday night. Running backs, Cameron Harris and Donald Chaney Jr. will split the carries for the Canes. I would say that they do lean on Cameron Harris a little bit more. So we'll probably see Harris a little bit more, but they're both almost the exact same size, and they're both also very comparable to Raja Harris of ECU. Obviously I would think those guys are a little bit better than Harris, but at the same time, they run the same type of style. They're bigger backs, not the height-wise, they're not the bigger ones, but the weight, they're all right around that same weight frame, build overall. And App held Harris to 22 yards on 8 carries. Now, Miami running backs will see a lot more than 8 carries apiece this weekend, but expect that to be play to App's advantage. As I mentioned last week, Mitchell was more dangerous for the Pirates. He ended up being much more dangerous with a smaller, shifty back. Miami doesn't seem to have that back, or at least didn't seem to play them against Bama's defense. So it'll be interesting to see how App's D holds up against the bigger backs who aren't as shifty as Mitchell. Both Pirates running backs were more successful in the passing game than the run game last week. I'd love to see this continue against Miami, as it would mean App is shutting down the Canes' running game. We'll see if that can actually happen, but I am hopeful that it can. Defensively, look for Tyreek Stevenson, Cameron Kitchens, and Bubba Bolden to lead the way. Kitchens really played more of a role after Bolden was ejected for targeting early on in the game, but I think with how he played, he will see more time this weekend. All three of them can hit, and all three of them can hit very hard. That's pretty obvious, but at the same time, you could tell that they were really looking for that big pop, get the crowd going, get their teammates into it against Bama. It didn't really come in the end, but you could tell that they were really looking for that hit to help their team. I would advise heavily to stay away from jet sweeps or going a bunch of sideways motions in the backfield. It didn't work for Bama, which is one of the better teams in football, and it's because Miami's team defense is just so fast. So I would say, just look to go straight up the gut on these handoffs. Hopefully that O-line can open up some holes, and we could really have a decent game here on Saturday night. I'd say it's really tough to predict this game. Bama is likely the best team in college football, and ECU is definitely closer to the other end of that spectrum. I think that puts these two teams, Miami and App, much closer than a lot of experts think. However, there's still the usual difference of size, speed, and depth found between most P5 and G5 matchups. Miami's offensive line has allowed 31 sacks over their last 9 games. I'm pretty sure App's defense can certainly add to that. We will see how successful overall they are, but I think that could help lead App to be in this game for the long run. I think offensively, they can work through what's possibly a slow start. Even Alabama's rushing game was not great against Miami last week. Their leading rusher only had 60 yards total. They did seem to throw a little more often, though, so App should have every chance to be in this game. They haven't passed for 354 yards total, and I think all but 10 of those yards came from their starting quarterback. So I think this one has every chance for App to be in it right to the end, and we could look for some great possibilities out of the App State offense, especially in the passing game. Maybe the opposite happens in the passing game, opens up the running game. I really do think this one could come down right to the nail-biting end, and I'd love to predict this one come down to another field goal to finish it all off.
No, the Chief don't run, the Chief don't. No, the Chief don't run.